welcome to 4U TV. We're glad to be here. I'm Dr. Mark, and it's Dr. Michelle, as always, with me. As we like to say, this is M&M without the sugar. I know it's kind of a funny joke, but hey, it's catchy. You'll remember that. That's M&M without the sugar couple. Yeah. Anyway, we are dressed a little bit different today because we've been requested to do some movement type of instruction. And today, we're going to do some movement. And movement, not dancing around, jumping around, all spastic and all hyper-stimulated. We're going to do some real functional movement stuff, and we're going to work our way up from the ground up. And I was thinking about this whole concept of movement, and I thought, man, you know, Jesus moved quite a bit. Before you say, what are you talking about, Mark? Seriously, where did Jesus move? You know, he didn't ride a camel all the time. He didn't ride a donkey all the time. He did at times, but he walked a lot. I found a passage in the scriptures I want to talk to you about today. It's found in Matthew chapter 14. And you know, we're all about teaching here. We want to inspire, educate, and motivate you to be better. We want you to learn to move and take care of your physical self as you take care of your emotional, intellectual, and spiritual selves. And all inclusive, that means total wellness, and that's where we want you to be. Dr. Michelle and I both want you to be well in, out of your body, inside and out, all around. We want you to be healthy all the way, to enjoy your life, as the Word of God says, enjoying good health in 3 John verse 2. So with that said, I've got my Bible back here, of course, and this is one of my favorite passages, you know, because being an active guy, like I am, and active people like we are, I like going to this passage because it talks about a lot of movement that Jesus did. And it's really cool because it's kind of between a couple of miracles, you know, when Jesus fed the 5,000. Amazing, you know, 5,000 men, not counting the women and children. He fed those 5,000 with just 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Right after that, he is teaching, and the great crowds are following him while he's doing that. So with that said, there's something that happens after he gets done teaching. He sends his disciples out in a boat. They get on the boat and go to the Sea of Galilee and start sailing off. And what does he do? I want to kind of read a couple of verses for you. It's going to be found in Matthew 14, verse 22 through, how far we should go? About verse 25. Give verse 25, 22 to 25, 4 verses. Beginning in Matthew chapter 14, verse 22 through verse 25. Right after he feeds the 5,000, okay? Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. And you say, what's significant about that? Walking on the water? Yes, that's off the charts amazing. But what sticks out for me in this place is this. I have been to this place. The Sea of Galilee is not a small pond. It's not a small lake. It's a big lake. You can see across most of it, but it's a long way away. So when I see this picture in my mind, I'm seeing this boat in the middle of the lake. It's not near the bank. As a matter of fact, the Word of God says it's a considerable distance from the land. The interpretation is many stadia, meaning a length of measure in the Greek. So with that said, after he dismissed the disciples, told them, get in the boat and go off, he walked up to a mountainside by himself to pray. That means he walked uphill. It took a little bit of effort. He walked. He did not ride an elevator. He did not ride a helicopter. He did not get his corporate jet and fly up to the mountain. He walked up there. After he was up there by himself with his Father, all alone, spending time to pray, quiet time. He walked somewhere to be quiet. Go figure, what a novel concept. When evening came, he was there, And guess what he had to do to get back down in the lake? He had to walk back down the mountain. So he walked up a mountain, down a mountain, then once he got down the mountain, he didn't stop there, he walked out on the water. So that's a lot of walking. Walking here, walking up, down, all around. You know, we have our joints in our knees and our joints in our body. They're designed to move. They're like hinges. Picture a hinge on a door. If that hinge on the door does not move very often, it gets locked in place. If it gets locked in place, that hinge, it's maybe made of sort of a metal, will begin to oxidize. It'll begin to rust. As it begins to rust, you try to move that thing, it's going to be locked in place. The same thing that happens in our bodies, hinges. They get locked in place because of lack of movement. So today we're going to talk about some movement. Dr. Michelle is one of the best, most well-known movement instructors in the country. We are privileged to have her here on 4E TV. So she's going to teach us if we're in a place where we're locked up, how to get out of it, and also if we're in a place where we're not locked up yet, how to keep from getting those hinges locked up. And we're going to take it today from the ground up. And I get to be the guinea pig here. So I don't know if I'm excited about that or not, but I'm going to give it my best. So Dr. Michelle, take it to the top and tell me what we're going to learn today regarding movement.
Well, first of all, we want to talk about getting just out of a chair, getting out of our postural dysfunction that we sit behind the wheel of a car with or in a chair. What I'm going to do is have Mark turn to the side, and I want to explain to you what alignment really should be. If you stand in front of the mirror and you look at yourself from the side, a good alignment would be dropping a plumb bob or a line from the ceiling down to the floor, and your joints should essentially stack up. Well, what does that mean? That means that the ear should be in line with the lateral side of the shoulder, which should be in line with the side of the hip, which should be in line with the knee, which then, as we travel down the body, should be in line with the lateral malleolus of the ankle. These should all essentially be a straight line. Well, when our posture starts to slump and our neck moves forward and our arms move forward, you can see what happens is our posture slowly becomes dysfunctional. We take stress in our upper back. We start to take stress in our lower back. The arches of our feet will fold or fall, and then our knees will start to collapse. So Mark and I are going to go through an exercise with you, teaching you to stack the blocks from the ground up. And the blocks are the lateral malleolus of the ankle, the lateral side of the knee, the lateral side of the hip, the lateral side of the shoulder, and the ear. Dropping a line down, those should all line up. Now, as we turn towards the front, we are going to go through an exercise that you can simply do at your desk, or even while you're driving. You can pay attention to where your anatomy is, and if your anatomy is collapsing on itself, causing lower back problems, neck problems, chest problems, mid-back problems, stress and tension, muscle spasm, and dysfunction. So let's look down at our feet. Our feet are the foundation. Our feet are the functional foundation for which we walk on the earth with and which forces transmit up the body. So I want you to ground down through the four corners of the feet, which is the ball of the big toe, the outer little bitty toe, the inner heel, and the outer heel. Press down into those four corners and now lift all 10 toes. Set all 10 toes back down. Now this time when you lift all 10 toes, I want you to pay attention to what happens to your arches. Lift those 10 toes and watch those arches lift. Let those 10 toes down and watch what happens to the arches. The arches now collapse. The body's collapsing on itself. Lift the 10 toes, watch the arches lift. Now feel what happens in the knees. The knees move laterally or away from one another. Let those 10 toes down. Feel what happens in the knees. The knees now shift to the midline.
I can feel that.
So when we collapse at the feet and we don't have any arch support, we don't have functional foundation in the feet, the knees become slaves to what's happening in the feet. So you can see that our shoes are what are called minimalist shoes. These minimalist shoes create a sensation of the earth, which allows us, when we do our training in the gym, we don't want to go out and run in these shoes. We may end up with stress fractures, but it allows us to improve the function of our feet, with which we just saw by lifting 10 toes, that lifts the arches of our feet. So the arch of the feet is formed by the action of the muscles in the feet. You get sloppy in the feet, we start to drop those arches, and then our knees move to the midline, and that creates dysfunction in the knees, knee pain, okay? So let's keep going with our exploration here. We're grounding down into the four corners of the feet. Let's lift all 10 toes and take those knees out wide. Now take your attention up the chain and what happens in the hips. Let all that down, and it's going to collapse down to the floor, right? Lift all 10 toes, lift the arches, watch the knees move out, paying attention now to what happens in the lower back. What happens from the floor transmits itself up the chain, through the ankles, through the knees, and now into the lower back. Now let all those 10 toes down and feel what happens in that lumbar spine. That lumbar spine now starts to shift forward, and we have an increased force or pressure in the lumbar spine. Well, where do most of us have dysfunction or pain?
Low back.
We've got a lot of dysfunction in our lower back. Well, perhaps that comes from not working the muscles of the feet and paying attention to what we're actually doing with our feet. A typical example of that would be just to pick up your shoes and look at the bottom of your shoes and see what the wear pattern on your shoes is. Are you wearing out the back heels? Are you wearing out the front forefoot? What's happening with your feet, the ground with which you walk on every single day? So are we creating structural dysfunction just by how we use our feet? So let's go back to our feet now. Ground down to the four corners of your feet. The ball of the big toe, the ball of the little bitty toe, the inner heel, and the outer heel. Raise all 10 toes and take that action up the legs. You watch the knees move out and the inner thighs start to move in. Just gently tuck that toe and take that stress off the lower back. Now rock that tailbone back the other direction. And then move that tailbone back under. And then let your 10 toes down. Now we're in neutral alignment. We're grounded down through the four corners of our feet. We've maintained the arches as we've let go of those 10 toes. And we've got our pelvis in a neutral position as we transfer that action up the chain. Okay? So now from here, we're going to begin to open the shoulders. Before you do any movement with your shoulders, I want you to pay attention to where your belly is. You know, is your belly collapsed? Is it rounded backwards? You know, what is the position of your diaphragm, the largest muscle of quiet breathing? It lives right here in the rib cage, underneath the rib cage here. And it is compressed when we slump our shoulders forward. So if we slump our shoulders forward, our diaphragm is compressed, therefore we're not taking our air in like we should be. So we're not oxygenating our body as good as we could be, okay? So we've got our feet grounded down, we've got our knees where they should be, we've got our pelvis where they should be. Now, just shrug your shoulders towards your ears, squeeze them together in the back, and then let them drop down the back. Once we drop those shoulder blades down the back, notice what happens. The chest opens, right? You got a broader chest, and that diaphragm now has come out of sitting in your pelvis. What's that action? We're driving down the road, we're in our hypervigilance state, we're typing at the computer. You know, this is where we start popping discs out the back of our neck. We start having impingement problems in the front of our shoulders because we live in that forward posture all day long.
You know, everybody out there right now is pulling their shoulders
back. Yeah.
I can even, it's funny, I can even see through the camera, the cameramen are doing that too. That's awesome.
It's important. So this will preserve your structure through time, because if you spend 60 years in a flexed forward posture, chances are it's going to be harder and harder and harder to unwind that and to change the nature of those bones after they've been there for 60 years. So if we just practice simple techniques in our jobs, in our chairs, in our cars, while we're driving down the road, we can prevent a lot of dysfunction and having to show up to the doctor for neck problems that are happening from structural dysfunction that we're actually doing 24/7 and throughout the day.
Right.
So let's just go from the ground up, Mark, from the ground up, and stack our blocks. So press down through the ball of the big toe, the ball of the little bitty toe, the inner heel, and the outer heel. Raise all 10 toes and watch those arches lift. Now I want you to keep those arches intact. Don't let those arches down, but let the toes down and ground into the earth. So now you've got the maintenance of the arches and the muscles of the feet are active, and you've transferred that up the chain and set the knees on line where the knees need to be. You feel that?
I do.
Good. Now take that action of the pelvis, rock the tailbone forward and back just a little bit, and notice how just the change in your pelvis changes the position of the knees and the ankles. So when you're sitting in the car for long periods of time and you're in a flexed forward position and your tail is backwards, it puts that pressure in your lumbar spine. Okay? So now you know, just by changing the position of where your tailbone is or where your sits bones are on that table or on that chair, you've corrected the anatomy in the lumbar spine and taken the pressure off those discs. So we have less disc pain, less muscle spasm, less backache, just by making some simple postural corrections in our system. Okay? Now we're stacked from the ground up. Our feet are grounded. Our hips are tracked. Now let's track our shoulders. Just take a big, deep breath in and let that breath out. And now just gently shrug your shoulders towards your ears. Bring those shoulders back. Squeeze them together in the back. And now take those shoulders down your back. And notice what's happened to your diaphragm. Now your diaphragm or your midsection is much more open, and that will allow you to take that big deep breath in and that cleansing breath out. And now our anatomy is stacked up. Now the last part is to stack the head. Most times we got our chin out in front of us, we're driving like this, or we're here. And the discs and the anatomy of the neck is compromised. So now that our shoulders are on our back, just take your chin back. And it's not a rock of the head forward and back. It's actually a forward and back of the neck bones on the spine. And it's going to feel real odd. It starts to line that ear up with the lateral side of the shoulder, the lateral side of the hip, the lateral side of the knee, and the ankle. And it's going to feel odd when we get into a proper alignment. It's going to feel like we're taking our neck back, but that's actually what we need, is to work the structure into the right alignment, and the body starts to heal itself once we actually have the right alignment from the ground up, from the arches, through the knees, through the hips, through the shoulders, through the neck bones of the ear. Then once we have proper alignment, now we can start to move into some really successful fitness, because now we're not stacking fitness on top of dysfunction. But can you see, if we don't have good activity in the structure and function of the feet, how stacking weight on top of our shoulders in a squat is going to further compromise the knees based on where the knees and the joints sit in space.
That makes sense to me. So you put a lot of weight on there, it could collapse the knees in.
Right, you're stacking fitness on top of dysfunction.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So now we're set up. What When we start to move, what's next?
So the next thing is to analyze balance.
Okay.
Let's just check and see how balanced we are by doing a simple weight shift from right to left. So ground down through the four corners of your feet, ball of the big toe, the little bitty toe, the inner heel, and the outer heel. Now I just want you to weight transfer to the right leg and bend your left knee. And see how balanced you are on that foot. Come back down, set that foot down. Let's go to the other side. Ground down into the four corners of the left foot. Weight transfer to the left and lift the right leg. And set that down. Now, most of us move from the front quads. We are front quad dominant and we don't use our back sides. So I'm going to teach you a little tip on improving strength and balance very quickly. If we ground down through the four corners of the feet, you had the sensation and the understanding of what it felt to shift the weight to the right leg, right?
Yes.
You had a sense of what your balance was like with that right leg. Now we're going to up the power of that just by bringing on the back side. So what I want you to do this time is we're going to shift the weight to the right leg in just the same way. Ground down through the four corners of the feet. Tighten the glute of the right leg. So now you're going to tighten that glutamus, that gluteus maximus, and you're going to weight shift to the right and bend that left leg. And notice how much stronger and more powerful you are standing on that leg when you simply isometrically contract the glute on the right side. And then set that down. Did you notice the difference in that?
Much more stable.
Yes.
Much
So
more
now
stable.
you're calling on 50% of the body that wasn't working when you just balanced and you weight shifted to the right. That's called paying attention. So when we start to move into training, we need to understand anatomy and alignment, and then we also have to pay attention. So if we know exactly what the function of the muscle is, we know exactly what to do for it. So now let's take the other side. We're going to ground down into the four corners of the feet, lift all 10 toes, lift the arches, transfer that up the chain like you've been taught, tuck that tail under, ground those toes down now, tighten the glute of the left leg, and shift your weight to the left. Stand on that left leg and improve your balance. That's one thing that we forget to do is balance. And set that down. And balance, as we get a little bit older, is harder and harder and harder to maintain. We can work these principles standing in the checkout line at the grocery store. We can work these principles sitting at our desks at home. As we start to progress into a more active lifestyle, the first thing is to be aware of our structure from the ground up, from our feet, through our hips, through our diaphragm and our breathing, and through our neck and shoulders, and stacking our blocks from the lateral side of the ankle, through the knee, through the hips, through the lateral side of the shoulder, and the outer edge of the ear. Where is your anatomy in space and time? And if you haven't ever paid attention, let's start paying attention to the structure of our body. That will allow us to know where we need to work as far as mobility, strength, and flexibility.
Should, when someone is checking themselves from the side, should they get someone to photograph them from the side so they can see it? Would that help?
Photographs are an absolutely valuable tool because you can see what you look like before, and then you can see what you look like after stacking the blocks, and then you can start to see what you look like after you've put our movement modalities in place over a few months. And we've worked on strengthening the places that need to be strong and mobilizing the places that need to be more mobile.
So this is going to help prevent potentially back, spine, knee injuries. And if a person is already in a dysfunctional state, it'll help rehabilitate those things, right?
Yes. When you go to the chiropractor, I want you to think about what a chiropractor does, is they put something back in place. They correct an anatomical disalignment or malfunction, but they don't necessarily teach the muscles what to do to stay strong. And me as an osteopathic physician, if I'm not teaching somebody what to do to stay in line or how to keep the muscles balanced from the front to the back, the right to the left, and side to side, if everything isn't symmetrically balanced and it doesn't know what to do, it becomes weak and dysfunctional. So if we're just going to get adjustment after adjustment after adjustment, and the muscles that are pulling things out of a line, or the muscles that have been weakened through time, if these things are not strengthened, then we're never going to get past our dysfunction.
That makes a lot of sense because, you know, many times we want to be active and exercise, but yet some of us probably, many probably have never heard the awareness from the feet to the ankles, to the knees, to the hips, to the shoulders, to the ears. I mean, that makes perfect sense. So I told you, pretty amazing, huh?
Yes, and so when once we know where we are in our alignment status, then we can start to progressively work into exercise. And those of us with joint dysfunctions, we need to be sensitive to joint dysfunctions and start where we're at, not start from a 350-pound press, you know, just out of the chute. We need to pay attention to where our mobility needs attention first.
Yeah, and we can't, the thing we're trying to stress here is until you can get the basic concepts right and are aware of those, even walking can become a painful thing, or it can remain that way or even get worse. And as Jesus walked, we want us to be able to walk. We want us to be able to move. The hinges need to be moved. I told you she did an awesome job. It's really cool. Okay, Ken, next time I want to do one, if you would take us through how to sit down. You know, how to work. The next time, can we do that?
We'll speak to the hips as a hinge.
I love that. We're talking about hinges. Speaking of hinges, I want you to keep the door hinge of your heart open for what God has for you today. A little different type of training today and teaching, but I know you've received that. Keep this handy. Go back to the basics. Ground up, bottom up. We want the whole thing to be functional. Dr. Mark, Dr. Michelle, we are saying be blessed today, and we will see you next time on 4E TV.